Great. This is Tim Gaspar. I apologize for the delay there, and I thank everybody for your patience for dealing with that technical issue for a minute. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. So we're fortunate enough, we're putting on this Earthquake Preparedness webinar. Fortunate enough to have Guillermo Sanchez from the American Red Cross and Cody Weireter from the Los Angeles Fire Department joining us, both of which I'll introduce shortly. My name is Tim Gaspar. I'll be moderating the webinar. So we will go ahead and jump in. All right, so we have an agenda set for the next 40 minutes or so. And so we're going to be going over a few things. First is the 3 steps for earthquake preparedness from the American Red Cross, followed by CERT training for earthquakes from the Los Angeles Fire Department, emergency planning for homework and school from the fire department, as well as emergency public alerting and notifications from the fire department. And then we'll end with what assistance is available from the government after an earthquake, and what exactly does earthquake insurance policies actually cover. Okay. All right, so first I'd like to introduce Guillermo Sanchez. Guillermo is the Preparedness and Resiliency Manager for the American Red Cross Los Angeles region, who works with the LA community to help get us prepared for the next disaster with the help of Red Cross volunteers to provide preparedness workshops within the community. Great, so we'll go ahead and pass it along to you, Guillermo.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you, everyone. Hello to all. Thank you for spending the time with us to talk about a very important topic, which is getting prepared for a disaster. I know this last earthquake got us, the attention, and I can say it's definitely something that we should be paying attention to. I was actually up there in Ridgecrest where the disaster happened, and there are a lot of folks who were caught off guard because they weren't prepared. So we don't want that to happen to you guys. So hopefully you guys are taking a lot of good notes because there's a lot of good information to be covered today. So like was mentioned, I'm going to cover the 3 steps of preparedness, right? And so when people think about preparedness, a lot of folks immediately think of getting the emergency kit, right? What goes inside of it. But a lot of times folks don't realize there are many more steps to it. So I'm gonna briefly cover it, what each of those steps are. But I will say, if you want more detailed information, I will recommend that you go to this website. So if you guys are, jotting stuff down, jot down redcross.org /prepare. That's redcross.org /prepare. And you will be able to get tons more information on what I'm covering right now that you can download, make plans yourselves. There's a lot of stuff that you guys can cover. So I'll go ahead and get started. So the very first step is getting an emergency kit. So yes, we definitely recommend that you get an emergency kit. The minimum kit that we recommend is that you get a kit for 3 days of supplies. But the reality is what we really want you to build a kit for is anywhere from 7 to 14 days, right? Because we know if something big happens here in Los Angeles, it'll be a long time before help does arrive. So we definitely want you to have an emergency kit. And what goes inside your emergency kit, the essential items, if you just go the 4 or 5 things that you really need, it's water, food, first aid kit, and medication. And when we're talking about water, there's a rule of thumb that you should always use when you're gathering water, right? Or you're collecting water. So when you gather water, make sure you are thinking of this, that you're getting 1 gallon of water per person per day, right? That's how much storage of water that you should have in the home or at work. And so that essentially, for example, translates to if you're building a 3-day supply kit of emergency supplies. If you have a family of 4, then you should technically have 12 gallons of water available in your home for those 3 days of emergency needs, right? So food, water, first aid kit, medication. Of course, food is very basic, non-perishable food that you can eat, right? We also recommend that you have, sturdy shoes, flashlight, radio, batteries, cash, contact information, copies of important papers, like driver's license, birth certificates, passports, copies of your insurance documents, all the kind of stuff that you would need to be able to demonstrate that you are who you are and that you have insurance and things like that. If you also have pets, we recommend that you have supplies for your pets, but don't forget about them. They're going to need their food, their water, their leashes, their vet records. So please make sure that you have their supplies too. There are 3 types of kits that we recommend. Of course, there's a personal kit, which is a 3-day supply that I mentioned about. So, and that's as simple as like a backpack that you can get, for example, with food and water for 3 days. Then there's the family supply kit, which is a 2-week supply worth of supplies. And that's what I was talking about, that 7 to 14 days. of supplies that you will need for in case you have to shelter in place within your home. And the last kit that we recommend is it's called a by the bed kit. And this by the bed kit is a very simple thing that you can actually do tonight. And that is simply getting a plastic bag or a bag of some kind, putting a pair of sturdy shoes, flashlight, and if you use glasses, put them in that bag, tie it to the bedpost, and that way that bag is there for when that earthquake happens, right? That way, if something were to happen, you're not trying to find it in the darkness, your shoes, your flashlights, and glasses, right? You will know where they're at because they're right there by the bedpost. So again, that's what we recommend for emergency kit. Next step that we recommend is the make a plan section. And a lot of folks don't think about this portion of it. Like I mentioned earlier, when people think of preparedness, they think of the kit portion, right? And then you get the stuff. But they forget to make the plan with their family, which is probably the most important part. And so when you're making a plan with your family, there are 3 simple steps. One, the first thing is talking, right? So for example, tonight after this webinar, when you guys go home, start talking to your family and start having those discussions. How am I going to get prepared? What are my risks and vulnerabilities? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? The whole point about this step is that you're going to have time. You're going to ask questions and you're going to have time to answer those questions. So I always like to say, you don't ever want to ask, how am I going to evacuate my house? Where are we going to meet after the earthquake has happened? Because at that point, it is too late, right? You want to have all those things identified prior to a disaster, which is why now is the time for you guys to have that conversation as a family and as individuals. The next part of it is the plan portion of it, right? And so there are 3 things that we recommend for the plan. The first thing is that you have an out-of-state contact, and this out-of-state contact is someone that lives, at least 200 miles away from your home. That can be the sole point of contact for your entire family to communicate in case something does happen here locally, right? Long distance calls are going to probably be easier to make and will come back quicker, right? And so the plan for the family is instead of trying to call locally, which will be very difficult to make, right? Because when something big happens in Los Angeles and that big one hits and 10 million people pick up the phone to call help or call for loved ones, lines are going to get jammed. So you want to have an asset contact that you can all contact and let them know that you're okay. You also want to have 2 evacuation routes, so know how to evacuate your home 2 different ways. And we recommend that you make a family escape plan, right? So that you sit down and that you discuss with your family how you're going to evacuate your house, right? And that's only for earthquake as well as for a home fire, right? We want to make sure that you know how to evacuate your house. We also want you to make sure that you have 2 places to meet that you have discussed prior to anything happening as a family, as individuals, right? If something were to happen, there are 2 places that we're going to meet. The first place is going to be within your neighborhood. So you could say, for example, if something were to happen and we're all coming home, we're going to meet at X location. That could be my front yard, my neighbor's house, somewhere within the neighborhood that the entire family knows that you all know you're going to be there. But if by the off chance you can't get to your neighborhood for different reasons or to your first option, then the second option is a secondary meeting place. And that's somewhere outside the neighborhood, a local church, a relative's house, a place, a park, somewhere that the family knows and is very familiar with that you can go to. And the last step in that is practice, right? Practice your plan. It is one thing to say, I'm going to do this. Once you start practicing, then it really gets ingrained into the family and into into your rhythm of life. So practice your plan twice a year. Review your emergency kit supplies twice a year, and make sure that they're kept up to standard, so that way you're not worried about things expiring. That's the make a plan section of it. The next step is being informed, right, and just knowing what to do during an earthquake. So I think most of us, hopefully we're taught the importance of drop, cover, and hold on, right? That is the messaging that is taught. A lot of folks would think that we should be getting under a door frame, but that is no longer taught. The current messaging is that you should drop under a table, cover under a table, and hold on to that table when an earthquake is happening. And so it's important that you do that. Now, if you cannot find a table, then the next best situation that can happen is that you would cover your head and your neck with a chair, or you find an interior wall and make yourself as small a target as possible. One thing that was learned during the 1994 quake in Northridge was that there were a lot of cut feet and cut hands, and that's because people were exposed and moving around a lot. So it's important that you guys drop, cover, and hold on under a table. If you happen to be using a walker or a wheelchair, then what's recommended is that you lock your walker and your wheelchair. You stay seated within your walker and in your wheelchair, and that you cover your head and your neck with either the cushion of your seat or your hands at least. And then once your earthquake stops, you can then move ahead and continue as well. We also want you to adjust your utilities. So make sure that you know how to properly shut off your water, how to properly shut off your gas, and how to shut off your electrical panel. And for those that may not necessarily know how to shut off your gas or what to do, the gas company recommends that you should only shut off your gas when you hear it. You hear a leak, you can smell gas leaking, or you see the dial on the gas meter spinning out of control. So it's important that you address your utilities after a major earthquake like that as well. And then finally, at the end of the day, we want you to make sure that you take these steps so that you are informed. We have an app that you can download called the Emergency app, where you can honestly, a lot of what I'm covering will be in that app as well, where you can find yourself, all the information about preparedness and be able to make a plan for yourself as well. Because at the end of the day, the reality is that, if a major earthquake happens here, you as an individual are going to be those first responders to respond not only to your family, but to your neighborhood, which is why I'm glad that we'll have someone from LAFD talking about CERT, because CERT is a great way for you guys to get involved and be able to help your neighborhood and get that advanced training as well, too. And so remember, at the end of the day, you will be that first responder. Please go to redcross.org/prepare to get more information. And that is my quick spiel on those 3 steps. So I'm not sure if we're taking questions now or we'll take questions at the end.
We're going to take questions at the end of the presentation, but definitely
Perfect.
Thank you, Guillermo, that's great information. And, I was trying to make a lot of notes here for my own family while you were talking. And I just want to let everybody know that we are going to be sending out a recording of this presentation. So if you didn't have a chance to jot down certain notes in regards to what Guillermo was talking about, we'll send that out. Great. So at this point, I'd like to hand it over to Cody Weireter from the Los Angeles Fire Department. And so Captain Cody Weireter is the Los Angeles Fire Department's Community Emergency Response Team, also known as CERT, Unit Commander. So we'll pass it along to you, Captain.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Kurt couldn't be here today, so you do get Cody. I don't know if you caught on to that.
Sorry, Cody.
That's okay. Anyways, thank you again so much for having me. A terrific presentation, Guillermo. It really stole a lot of my thunder. But regarding those folks that are on the meeting for this afternoon, I applaud you for taking the steps of preparedness. Earthquakes right now are definitely not the hot topic again in the news. We have to have the earth shake before we actually have around-the-clock coverage. So hopefully it's a good reminder that, even though it's out of sight, out of mind, it's still right around the corner. So along those lines, like we mentioned, CERT, which is the Community Emergency Response Team, was actually started here in Los Angeles by the Los Angeles Fire Department back in 1986. This is a free course still provided throughout Los Angeles for the past 30 years. And the idea is to really give the community the tools and the knowledge and the confidence to prepare themselves, really how to prepare themselves, and really how to respond safely in the wake of an incident in really a kind of an all hazards environment that we have here in Los Angeles. In particular towards earthquake safety, just one of the topics that's learned in the or instructed during the CERT training is that earthquake response of shutting down utilities, building that emergency kit, and really what to do to be able to do the most good for the most amount of people in your neighborhood and around you. With this CERT training, again, it's a commitment of 1 day a week, normally about 2.5 hours a class, and it's a 17 and a half hour course, and it's taught by experienced LA City firefighters. And so one of the huge caveats, or one of the huge benefits from that, is the fact you have firefighters who have either been firsthand experience, whether it's a USAR urban search and rescue situation of building collapses or fires along those lines, is able to provide the community really those tools and those lessons learned along with the lines of that CERT training that's going to be really most appropriate for our community and for our neighbors. For the CERT training, if you'd like to find out more information, really anything involving CERT, we really encourage you to go to www.cert-la.com, and that shows all the classes that are open to the public that are continuously scheduled throughout the year. And then along those lines too, is you're able to actually register a course if you have 25 or more people, and we really show up anywhere. Inside the boundaries of the city of Los Angeles, whether it be a school, a community event, neighborhood council, or even a workplace. Along those lines too, if you don't have that time frame, we also offer at our community emergency response team unit is a disaster preparedness awareness training. And what that is that we can really facilitate a 2-hour class for a work group or a neighborhood group in preparedness steps for earthquakes, for floods, and then also we're able to have that live fire training, that extinguisher training to really safely and effectively operate a fire extinguisher. So again, if you'd like to find out more, we encourage you to go to www.cert-la.com and really be able to kind of explore that. For our emergency earthquake plans, we've got here for home, work, and school. Just like my partner here, Guillermo, had mentioned about at home, is really the first start is have the conversation. Starting the conversation at home and having that natural buildup of hey, what is our family preparedness plan here? In any world and any preparedness level, or excuse me, every family, you have different levels of preparedness, whether it be the doomsday prepper to the, hey, we have a first aid kit. Regardless, the fire department especially would like to have folks really focus on just starting that conversation and starting to build up that level of preparedness, but it has to start somewhere. So in your home, you're making sure that all of your items that are secured inside your home, whether it be TVs or nightstands or bookshelves, and making sure they're secured to the wall and using those earthquake straps in your refrigerator and so forth. And then having that escape plan, just like my partner was saying, not only at home, but at work. At work, it's normally we show up when the bell rings, and then hopefully when the bell goes off, we all go home, and that's the end of the workday. But during that time is really knowing your escape routes, your stairwells. If you're above ground in the sense of a high rise, is knowing your hazards of what could possibly fall or break or really kind of injure yourself or others around you. So having that idea of that situational awareness is going to really play a huge part in preventing any kind of injuries related to an earthquake. Along those lines is that, yes, you may have that preparedness kit at home and it's ready to go in the garage or in a side room or wherever it may be, but having something at work, whether it's that whole floor is all in together on an emergency kit, or having something near your desk, something that you have is going to be extremely beneficial when that large-scale earthquake does hit Los Angeles, and you have that basic essentials to be able to get you through, either the workday or get you home to where your major supply cache may be. And as for school, we kind of, a lot of times we have our kids at school, and one of the things that I had to really have that conversation with my wife was, what is the release program or the release sequence of our children? If we have a large scale incident, or a large scale earthquake, and we run to the school to get our children, it's unfortunately not going to be as easy as you think it may be, because they still also have a responsibility of making sure that we have, our children are safe also there and accounted for. So what does their process look like, and what does their emergency evacuation area look like, and are all your contacts updated, emergency contacts there, in the event that you are unable to pick up your child for whatever reason that may be? So a lot of the questions that come up is what do we do at home? What do we do at work? But a lot of times we do forget, earthquakes happen at any time, whether you're driving into work or driving to get something to eat, whatever it may be. That's something to have in the back of your mind is, what is it going to look like when we do have a very large scale earthquake hit Los Angeles, or an area that you may be in that affects the roadways while you're operating a motor vehicle. We always recommend it to really pull to the right. If you can safely, stop your vehicle and remain inside until the shaking does end. But along those lines is as you're safely merging over or wherever you may be, is looking at some of the hazards you have around you, whether it be overpasses, high-powered tension lines, or any kind of signs or anything that has a falling hazard potential to it, and trying to keep yourself in an open area. I know that downtown would be more of a challenge than anything, but being able to kind of have an idea of having that open area to have that safe area if things were in the event we're able to collapse. With that also said is preparedness doesn't just end at home and at work. It's you have something personally in your vehicle in the event that roadways are impassable or freeways are closed or anything along those lines. Is do you have something that's either food or water or flashlights if it's during the evening or nighttime hours is in your vehicle, whether it's a backpack or a container, something along those lines. But a lot of these different tips and really kind of a breakdown that has been so helpful for folks has been really the 7 steps to earthquake safety. And a lot of that information can be brought up on that website of www.shakeout.org. And it really kind of gives that picture and those videos of something to think about you may not necessarily always have in the back of your mind. So with our alerting systems in Los Angeles, social media is kind of the, and text messaging is like our right hands now, or left hand if you are. But the biggest thing is as your posts are popping up and saying people are liking your status in Facebook, and have that also that idea of what our emergency alerts look like. In Los Angeles, we encourage all to sign up, which because it's a voluntary sign-up process, is Notify LA. And if you go to www.notifyla.org, and if you sign up, they're able to have wireless emergency alerts that are able to go to your phone through a text message, an alerting system, almost in a sense of it, like an Amber Alert would go off. And those are the most crucial alerts that are going to be really coming to your cell phone in the event that we have a large-scale earthquake, and what really follows that, whether it's an evacuation, are we going to be sheltering in place, what are our major concerns, or any kind of major infrastructure failure is going to really come through those notifications. And that's how you're really going to get that up-to-date, that information. Along those lines, what we really also encourage for those that do follow Twitter is the Los Angeles Fire Department's official alerting system, which is normally is at LAFD, and that's where you can kind of see a chronological live feed of incidents that are active within the city of Los Angeles. And so in the event you decide not to do Twitter, but if you do go online, if you go to lafd.org/alerts, it'll be able to give you really all the up-to-date information that we have on scene at an emergency incident that we're able to push out to the public in the event we do have a isolated, whether it be a hazmat or an earthquake, or if we're in earthquake mode or a fire, and we're able to push out really the evacuation orders and areas to avoid at all costs. So those two are the really large alerting systems that we have in Los Angeles, and that Notify LA is so crucial to really take the time to go sign up. And the nice part about it is that it's not junk mail coming through, which is nice. It's if that thing's going off, there's an emergency and you're going to really need to pay attention. And then we just recently, the Los Angeles Fire Department released our new emergency preparedness guide. And you can actually download a digital version if you were to go to CERT-LA.com. And on CERT-LA.com, it has that link that you're able to download that PDF version of this emergency preparedness guide. The other thing is because when they first came out, they became very, very popular. So we're in the process of trying to obtain additional copies. But if you visit your local Los Angeles Fire Department fire station, these are free for you. These are free provided to the public, and they have extremely great, helpful information inside of them that if you don't have time to go through the CERT training, which we obviously very much encourage, this really has a good starting point, and it's a good reference point of whether it be earthquake safety, evacuations, or wildfires, or even really where to install your smoke detectors or your smoke alarms. So again, these are one of the most invaluable things to have, not only just, whether it's in the kitchen or in your emergency preparedness pack or kit. It really gives you a real sense of all the clear information of really what to do and to try and keep away from the misinformation, if you will, and the misguiding. And it kind of, these are our recommendations from the LAFD that really best suits our the public's needs.
Great. Thank you so much, Captain Cody. That was some fantastic information. And again, just to reiterate, we are going to send out a recording after this webinar so we can make sure that you have all those links and different resources that Captain Cody went over, and hopefully we'll get some folks to sign up for that CERT program because that looks fantastic. So thank you. Great. So moving on, I'm the CEO of Gaspar Insurance. We're the leading earthquake insurance provider within the San Fernando Valley. I've been doing this for about 20 years. During that 20 years, we haven't had a big one down here in Southern California, which is, of course, why we're doing this webinar. So I'm just going to talk very briefly about earthquake insurance, explain a little bit about how earthquake insurance works, and hopefully be able to answer a few questions. But first, a lot of folks ask if earthquake insurance is necessary because there are some types of assistance that may be available after disaster. And so the thing to know is that the assistance available is pretty limited. So in the event there's a presidentially declared disaster, like a major earthquake, the assistance that you can get from FEMA is limited to $35,000. And so that doesn't mean that FEMA is going to just hand you $35,000 because you asked for it. They need to qualify. So you have to qualify, and the amount could be less. And then also, it's only for your primary residence. So if you own an apartment building or a rental home, you wouldn't qualify for FEMA at all. And then the other option that exists, and some folks might remember this from the Northridge quake, are SBA loans. So if you're a business owner and potentially a non-business owner, you might be able to get a loan through the SBA of up to $250,000 at a low interest rate. But of course, that's a loan, and loans need to be repaid. So relying on a loan to rebuild your home in the event of an earthquake could help out, but it certainly wouldn't be your sole means of rebuilding your property. So what does earthquake insurance really cover? A lot of folks know, earthquake insurance is expensive. They have big deductibles. Both of those things are partly true, but certainly it's important to understand exactly how it works. I'm just going to dig into the details a little bit right now. So essentially, in the state of California, you may have access to something called the California Earthquake Authority, which is essentially a state program. And I say may have access because your home insurance carrier needs to be a participating carrier. So some examples would include State Farm, Farmers, Mercury, Safeco, Liberty Mutual. There's a number of carriers that participate with the CEA, but it's not everybody. So if you have Travelers Homeowners Insurance, for instance, that's a great company, but it won't give you access to the California Earthquake Authority. So if you cannot get access to the California Earthquake Authority, you can go through one of many private earthquake carriers in the state of California, or based on some of the information we'll go over, you might actually opt to go with a private carrier, even if you do have access to the CEA. So first things first, a few examples here. I put chimneys first because if you lived through the Northridge quake, you might remember one of the things that you saw when you were driving down a residential street were a lot of chimneys laying on front lawns of residences because they simply detached from the house. So if you have CEA, that coverage is going to be limited to $10,000, where with a private carrier, you can get full coverage for that. The next thing would be walkways, driveways, and patios. Being that those are typically made of concrete, they're usually going to be prone to damage from an earthquake. With the California Earthquake Authority, the coverage is limited to essentially whatever will get you from your driveway to your front door. So the cement that you have for a sidewalk on the side of your home, a pool, or a hardscaping would generally not be covered by the CEA, where you can get that coverage with a private carrier. Retaining walls, certainly a lot of toppled block walls after Northridge. The only way to get coverage for that with the California Earthquake Authority would be if the retaining wall is structurally necessary for the stability of your home, where with a private earthquake carrier, you can get coverage for that too. And then awnings and patio coverings, the only way to get coverage for that would be with a private carrier. So then probably one of the key things that folks ask about when it comes to earthquakes, a lot of folks immediately think about their swimming pool. And in the event a swimming pool is damaged, a lot of carriers used to not cover it, and the California Earthquake Authority still does not cover it, but many private earthquake carriers will now give you coverage for your pool for up to $50,000. So if you have something really elaborate with waterfalls and a grotto, that's not going to do the trick. But certainly it'd be nice to have some coverage instead of none, or at least know what you have. And then probably I would say the most important coverage on this whole page is your loss of use coverage. So the loss of use coverage is the coverage that pays for you to stay in a rental home, stay in a hotel if those are available, while your home is uninhabitable or being rebuilt. And a lot of times folks underestimate how long you might be out of your home. There's actually homes from the November fires last year that are still not being rebuilt because it takes a lot of time to haul away the debris, to get the permits that you need for LA County or Ventura counties. And so when you take a look at how long it takes to haul away debris, get permits, and then how long it'll take to find a contractor when there's a catastrophe like this, you could easily be out of your home for 2 or 3 years. And so with the California Earthquake Authority, they'll give you up to $100,000 in coverage, where with a private carrier, you can get up to 3 years of coverage depending on the value of your home. So that's just something you want to be aware of, because if you fall short on that coverage, you're going to be living with, a family member or extended relative for a long period of time. Then we have fragile items, which is available through CEA, up to $25,000 with a private carrier if you have artwork or statues. If you have artwork you really care about, it'd be a better idea to get a separate policy for that called a personal article floater that'll actually give you coverage for earthquakes and fires and anything else you can think of. And then lastly, your ordinance or law, that pays to rebuild your home up to the current code. So if God forbid there was an earthquake today, you want to make sure your home is rebuilt to 2019 code. It can't be rebuilt how it was built back in the 60s or whenever your home was originally built. So a couple of good examples would be, one would be the new GFI electrical outlets that would be necessary for a home. And then also homes built nowadays are required to have indoor fire sprinklers, which didn't exist many years ago. So the cost to rebuild your home now would be, there'd be a lot of additional costs there. So with the California Earthquake Authority, that's limited to $30,000, where a private carrier will be 10% of the dwelling, which for most folks is going to be more than that $30,000. So one of the biggest questions folks have when it comes to earthquake insurance is about your deductible. You figure on your average fire insurance policy, your deductible might be $1,000, $2,500, maybe $5,000. On an earthquake policy, they're typically a lot higher than that. So the one thing that you need to know is that whatever your deductible is, you don't need to write a check to the insurance company. If your deductible ends up being $50,000, that's still a large number, but the insurance company is just going to go ahead and deduct it from your claim check before they give it to you. And the damages do add up pretty quickly. For instance, in Northridge, if you had an exterior window that actually shattered onto your carpet, the insurance company was required to replace the carpet for at least that entire room, and if it didn't match, for the entire house. So the damage adds up pretty quick. So even a sizable deductible might be a little bit easier to absorb. And in regards to the size of deductibles, 10 years ago, all you could find was 15% or higher. But now the California Earthquake Authority will go as low as 5%, and private carriers will actually go as low as 2.5%. Now, the thing to remember with that is this is a deductible. This is a percentage of your coverage and not a percentage of the damage. So you need to hit that number first before the policy will pay you anything. But certainly if you have a 2.5% deductible, that'd be a lot easier to get to that number. Just keep in mind, the lower the deductible is, the higher your premium will be. And if you have a 2.5% or a 5% deductible, it's going to make the premium a lot larger than maybe what you were used to paying for earthquake insurance. All right, so which coverages are really important? It'd be great to have a policy that has a 2.5% deductible with all the bells and whistles, but the reality is uh, there's only a certain amount of money that you can really budget towards earthquake insurance if you decide to make that purchase. So the key things you want to focus on are your dwelling limit with the maximum building code upgrade coverage, because you want to make sure your home can actually be rebuilt at the end of the day. That loss of use coverage to make sure that you can be at your house for 2 or 3 years and have it paid for. If you have a pool, the swimming pool and hardscape coverage is very important. And then lastly, that personal property coverage. If you have things that are breakable that really mean a lot to you, it'd be best to insure those separately just so you don't have to rely on your earthquake insurance policy. So those are the things you really want to focus on when you're talking to your insurance agent. Awesome. So I know I went through that pretty quickly. We're actually going to go ahead and send out not only a recording of this webinar, but also some other documents, a couple of items directed towards business owners and a couple of items directed towards homeowners that include an emergency action plan and some other really neat stuff that you can put to use right away. Great. And now we'll be taking questions. So if you have a question, please go ahead and type it on the chat feature. We'd be more than happy to answer it for you now. All right. First question. Are there any tips or information for on-site property managers or apartment buildings, as that would be helpful? Great. Guillermo or Cody, do you have anything that might be a resource for folks that own apartment buildings?
Depending on for the request of what it may be, whether it's an evacuation plan or if it's looking at extinguisher training or if they just would like a general fire safety presentation, I encourage them to visit one of their neighborhood local fire stations and make that or create that relationship with that fire station there to kind of find out they don't have to just come during the normal fire preventive inspections, but hey, can you come by and take a look at our building and kind of say, what's the best escape routes that we have here, and because unfortunately we don't set up normally escape plans, but what we do is we make those recommendations and see what those common hazards that could be.
Awesome, thank you. Great. And another question, you touched on it briefly there. We have somebody that's asking if they ask the fire department to essentially come by their home and see how at risk their home is for damage in the event of an earthquake, is that something that the fire department does, or could you offer any guidance in regards to that?
Yeah, unfortunately, the fire department does not fulfill that request. We're not the building engineer specialist. What I would do is I would recommend either dialing 311 or going through the 311 app, looking with not building engineering, but the building department with the city of Los Angeles, and seeing really what programs that they may offer for structural integrity and possible risk.
Thank you. And then we have a question on, if you're in the unfortunate situation of actually sitting in your car on the freeway in the event of an earthquake, the person is asking, would it make more sense to get out of your car and get farther away from any falling danger? What do you think about that?
No, I actually, you're a lot better off if you remain inside your vehicle and you're able to pull away from any kind of large items such as the large billboard signs or any kind of overpasses or bridge crossings, because as soon as you exit your vehicle, you're now prone to maybe the driver that wasn't paying attention or was beginning to panic or other emergency vehicles may be passing by at the same time. Debris that falls, your vehicle can protect you from a lot. And with that is really the safest spot for you would be to remain in your vehicle until the shaking ends. And then once you begin to go is really pay attention to the roadway there to see, do we have a shift in pavement? Is there any structural compromise or really did any overpasses, go down, whether it's at night? So it's really gonna have to proceed with caution and speed.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Captain. All right. And then another question here. This one, it looks like it might be insurance related. If you're forced out of your home during a rebuild after an earthquake, do you know if the mortgage companies still require you to make your full monthly payments, or might that be taken out of insurance settlement funds? So it's interesting. In Southern California and for all parts of the country, for instance, most mortgage companies do not require earthquake insurance. But certainly, regardless of what happened to your actual home, they do require you to make the payments. So within most mortgage contracts, there's nothing that will give you any relief there. We did notice after the wildfires, there were some banks and other folks we work with that gave people a little bit of grace time there, where they said they might accept a payment 30 days later than usual to give people a little bit of breathing room. But yeah, unfortunately, the mortgage company will still require the mortgage payment, which is why it's important to have insurance coverage that actually pays for you to stay somewhere else. So you're not paying that out of your pocket. And then another question, looks like it's also insurance related, is how do you determine the amount of coverage for your property? So for your dwelling, it's not related to the market value, because market values, especially here within California, so much of it is really the land that it sits on. And so essentially it's going to be a cost per square foot, and that's going to vary quite a bit. If you have a home that's maybe in a community like Canoga Park or a lot of parts of the valley, the cost per square foot for replacement might be $250 a square foot. If you did a custom home that's maybe more in West LA with custom cabinets and a lot of tile work or something along those lines, it could be as high as $500 or $600 a square foot or more. So usually what we want to do is match what's on the fire insurance whenever possible. And then a question related to how the deductible is determined. Usually you would look at different percentages. It's always going to be a percentage amount instead of a dollar amount to make a determination based on that. Great. So this question's for Captain Cody. In a big earthquake, is it best to, if you text a friend out of the area, will the text go through?
That's a very good question. When you call 911, the fire department shows up to hopefully solve your problem or whatever the problem may be on your worst day. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of experience with the cell phone coverage or what plans may work or how those texts go through. But what we can do is tell you that if for whatever reason, if the cell service is down or whatever, if it's an older cell phone that doesn't work, you can still dial 911 with those cell phones or the cell phones and be able to reach one of our 911 dispatchers as long as they're not completely inundated with 911 calls. But as for the texting going out of state, or you'd have to check with your local carrier or your cell phone provider to see exactly what her capability was.
Terrific, thank you. It's funny, Captain Cody. I have a landline in my house, and the only reason I have it is because I remember in the Northridge quake, that was the only thing that worked. So hopefully hopefully the cell phone towers will be a little bit more resilient this time, but we'll see. Great, so
absolutely. Mm-hmm. I was going to say, one of the issues that we came up was as soon as we have an earthquake, one of the recommendations we have is our 911 system becomes extremely inundated, not so much with actual emergencies, but with folks calling 911 to say that they felt an earthquake and if there was any damage. And I just really to remind all of our listeners out there that unless we have an actual life-threatening emergency, when you call 911, it's not to find out if the earthquake was nearby.
Sure. You'd watch that local news for that, hopefully, or look at Twitter. And then a question here, after an earthquake or other disaster, does the city or the fire department suggest evacuation routes if it's necessary to evacuate the city?
Yes. We're a lot more prone and practiced in wildfires when that incident does come up. With something that grand scale or large scale, normally because of it's an immediate impact for life and safety. Having something that grand scale of actually evacuating the city of Los Angeles is something that our emergency management department looks at, and our city planners that work together on that. But along the lines of whether it's an immediate evacuation in result of a brush fire, whether it was caused from an earthquake or a hazmat or something along those lines, our teams get together on scene and start to immediately unify with all the different partnering agencies and entities that really are going to be involved in this, whether it's during those brush fires, whether it's LAPD and also the LAFD getting together and bringing up, our evacuation maps and then pushing that information out of safely removing occupants from those areas.
Terrific. Thank you. Great. And then another question just popped up. How do you know how to select a good meeting point outside your home if you don't know which part of the surrounding area will actually be safe?
That's a great question. So one of the things is that we try to really emphasize finding an open area or a safe area that's clear of any overhead obstructions at all, or any kind of falling debris, or any kind of immediate hazards that you may find, whether it be like I mentioned before, like any kind of billboards or any kind of light towers, and having that meeting place for your neighborhood is crucial. And really speaking to your neighbors and seeing, what are their thoughts and what's their plan, because if having that conversation prior to is really going to prevent a lot of that anxiety when it does actually happen. One of the things that I didn't mention was we do offer the CERT classes in the city of Los Angeles, but because our CERT program has become so large, we actually have our LAFD CERT team, and it's actually our LAFD CERT volunteers who work intimately with the LAFD, and we have battalion coordinators that geographically cover the entire city that offer monthly meetings on preparedness and this topic specifically of neighborhood teams and staging locations and really safe areas had just been brought up the other day. And you can find all that additional information on CERT-LA and find out where your community is and who your local battalion CERT coordinator is. And that'll really kind of get you involved in what those community meetings are and have that networking with your neighbors for preparedness.
Terrific. Thank you. Great. And then it looks like our last question here. Does your house need to be inspected for good structure before getting insurance? And this is from Northern California. Or before getting a price? So you can get a price without an inspection. There are discounts available if your home's been retrofitted and that's signed off on by a contractor. But in most cases, you don't actually need an inspection or proof in order to get the quote, in order to actually get insurance. Great. Well, that concludes our webinar. I'd like to give a giant thank you to both Guillermo from the Red Cross and Captain Cody from the Los Angeles Fire Department. Thank you very much for taking your time, and to our participants that made the webinar today, want to give a big thank you. And as I mentioned, we're going to go ahead and send this out electronically along with the materials that we promised so that everybody gets a copy. So thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having us. Appreciate it.
All right, of course. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.